As the country's seniors graduate, the obvious and perhaps timely question is, what's a degree worth today? I'm in Connecticut at Yale University, and finals have just ended. I'm sitting in a vacant classroom with current Yale student Mike Haddam in front of 31 desks. It's always a strange feeling being around a school when classes are out of session. There is an idleness to a place that thrives on movement. But for Mike Haddam, who entered the Ivy League a year ago, the idea of sitting in a Yale classroom was even stranger. Mike's a mid-30s PhD student in the history department. He's got a wife and 2 young boys and lives in a house about a mile away from the classroom we're sitting in. But what differentiates Mike from the other students isn't necessarily his focus in early American history, it's where he comes from.
We had initially set the crib up by the front window. That changed after about a month. And then moved the kids into the back room, worried about stray bullets, drug dealers on the corner,
That room and the house they lived in was in Staten Island and stood across the street from one of the worst projects in New York City. Before Mike lived here with his girlfriend and 2 sons, before he ever imagined what he'd have to go through, Mike was a teenager in a working-class town in New Jersey. Although he describes himself as a fairly normal kid, he says he didn't mesh well with high school, and not in the way most frustrated teenagers do.
I attended maybe spottily for the first 6 months freshman year, and then I stopped going. Then I dropped out officially when I was 16,
But it wasn't like he didn't enjoy learning. Mike's always been well-read. Even as a child, when his mother used to bring home 1-volume-a-week encyclopedias from the supermarket, he's always been fascinated with learning, and in particular, American history.
The worst experience I've had in both my junior high and my high school years was with my American history teachers. They were absolutely horrible. But it's partly because I read so much American history on my own, that when I got to high school and they tried to start feeding me the textbook, I realized that that they weren't interested in teaching history. They were interested in teaching you, just some dates and everything. They didn't want to know about, anything. They didn't want to know about questions about it,
So without the stimulation and with the ability to educate himself outside the classroom, Mike called it quits. But his self-education didn't bring him anywhere in the years preceding his high school departure.
At one point, I had a job working 12-hour shifts overnight in a liquor warehouse on a line.
And you worked a lot of other menial jobs. That is, until the work dried up.
By the time that my first son was born, it was to the point where pretty much the only thing I could get was a job as a foot messenger, it's like the lowest of the messenger jobs, which is already like one of the lowest jobs you can get in the city, So at the end of the week, I'd worked 50 hours, and my check was for $103. I remember, I opened, I was just, I remember just being in shock. And yeah, it was like $2 an hour. That's what I was making. I'm thinking, what am I going to do? You know what I mean? My girlfriend is pregnant, and my son's just about to be born, and I'm making $2 an hour, and this is the best that I can do. What else can I do?
And he said it wasn't even a matter of urgency anymore. Now, it was desperation. And despite the panic, it was clear what he needed to do, and fast.
It was school. That was like I want to say it seemed like my only option, in the sense that it was going to be the only thing that I could do that would, even have the possibility of me moving forward in any kind of way.
So as soon as he could, Mike enrolled in Borough of Manhattan Community College, and with success there, he entered the BA program at the City University of New York a year later. And after further success there, he transferred to the City College of New York. The main thing was, Mike was gaining momentum. He won a $5,000 a year fellowship for a paper he wrote, which allowed him to stop working those menial jobs. Now, he could focus solely on school. So much so that his paper on the popular response to the coming of the revolution in New York City earned the interest of a professor at the school, who then nominated Mike for the Columbia Undergraduate Journal of History. So this guy, who was taking care of his 2 little boys, while his girlfriend was working 60 hours a week and was doing his schoolwork in the middle of the night, wasn't just another guy, or even another college guy. Mike was now becoming a candidate for some of the top PhD programs in the country. And that's where I met him, at Yale. He would not only get in, but the school would give him a full ride, pay for housing, his family's health care, and a generous stipend.
I don't want to say it's a fluke. I don't want to say it's a fluke, right? Because then, in some sense, that I don't want to cheapen it. I don't want to cheapen it, right? But at the same time, I don't want to sit here and say, oh, well, I just worked hard, oh, I was just committed, right? Because then that perpetuates that, the myth, right? Like the old myth of, if you just work hard, good things will happen, right? I mean, generally, that's not true. Generally, it's not true.
Mike's story, like Bill's, represents two distinct portions of the higher education pool. The other, and remaining portion, is represented by an upper middle class to upper class division, where college is affordable, and that's all it needs to be. But what the two men's stories have in common is that they decided they needed to go somewhere different from where they were. A ticket to somewhere else. The problem today, however, is that ticket doesn't always take you somewhere, or at least not in the way it used to, like the GI Bill did for men returning from war. And although the price of the degree is clearly different for the two men, that ticket has taken them somewhere they were not before. I drop Mike off at his house, and we go out to check out his neighborhood. It's a tree-lined street housing professors and grad students. But what's funny about his house, which is at the top of a hill, is that if you went straight from the front door and walked down, you'd end up in a classroom with children. This is the school his little boys are at. I didn't ask what he thought about this geographical possibility, the simple and direct path his sons need to get to school. He's a smart guy, and probably knew it the day they moved in. For You Are Here, I'm David Levine.
Yesterday, heard the choir singing